Trump's program is actively deindustrializing and accelerating it. If an observer for outer space were to look at his actions, and we'll discuss that during the show, there seemed to be a common aim to irreversibly dismantle American industry.
I'm Radhika Desai, and today I'm joined by Michael Hudson. Now, I've been stuck in recent days with a striking new development. We know that twice Donald Trump won presidential elections by underlining the deindustrialization of the United States and its effects on jobs and standards of living. Meanwhile, the Democrats lost because they kept insisting that the economy was doing very well, and even blamed voters for not recognizing this, not understanding how well the economy was doing. But of course, the voters knew that there was a big discrepancy between the cherry-picked numbers that the Democrats were highlighting and their own experience. Now, as we know, the Democrats are in disarray, and you might think that they would mount a counterattack. Given that Trump's tariff strategy is so mad, and we've discussed this in previous shows, and we've highlighted how attempts to find a method in Trump's madness are going to fail because it seems to be all madness and very little method. So you'd think that this was, Trump's sort of soft underbelly and that they would attack there. They would point out that Trump's strategies are unlikely, as we have shown, to achieve its advertised results. But what's clear from the counterattack, as it's now emerging, now that it's actually materialized, is that this would be too rational a strategy for a party that is determined to self-destruct. So instead, the counterattack is taking the form of insisting, wait for it, that there's nothing wrong in the first place. This is exactly what would have ensured Biden's defeat and eventually ensured Harris's. So today we are going to examine these arguments, not least because they also defend the dollar system, which in this show we have exposed it time and again as having been toxic and continuing to be toxic, not just for the rest of the world, but also for working people in the United States.
Well, I think that if you imagine that simply changing the savings rate or interest rates or the exchange rate or tariffs is automatically going to induce industry, it's sort of like a farmer putting pesticide all the way around his field and saying, well, now the crops are going to grow. What he leaves out of account is planting is necessary. And this is a theory that was used by the Allies to impose German reparations in the 1920s. It was all disproved by Keynes in his arguments. I have a whole chapters on that in my book on trade, development, and foreign debt. What I think you're going to be talking about is how industry is a complex, multidimensional process, and you can't just select one precondition or one parameter and imagine that this is all that you need. I think creating an industry or reviving one that has disappeared, it's sort of like a combination on a safe. You have to have the whole combination to open the door. Well, that's one of the things you need for industrialization. You need industrial labor. And today's manufacturing jobs pay about 35 cents an hour more than service labor, being a waiter or a cashier or a packer at the American warehouse. Construction gangs are very low paying. You need high-skilled labor, and if the cost of getting high skills has to be borne by the employee, then you're not going to have. They're going to choose to be a waiter. And they're not going into industrialization. So while Trump pretends to be supporting labor, namely the already unionized labor in things like the steel industry, you're not going to have industrialization without people working in factories. And who wants to work in a factory except immigrants? But then Trump has blocked the immigrants. So there's not going to be a labor force to work in them if you were to somehow build them.
No, this is really interesting, and I have to share this as well. There are some, I'm sure practically everybody who is watching our show has seen these, but it's worth reminding ourselves of these. These are still images from some videos that have gone viral on various social media, which show, this is created by artificial intelligence. These are not real scenes, and they are basically trying to put across the idea that Americans don't really want manufacturing jobs. And in order to put across this idea, they are creating these dystopian visions of American workers who are working at these very primitive work platforms. This is not what manufacturing looks like today. This is not what manufacturing should look like if the US industrialized. But the idea is that we should not, another way of naturalizing deindustrialization is simply to say that American workers don't want these jobs, and since they don't want to do these jobs, they should be offshored to countries with a lower wage rate. Michael, you want to say something?
Yes, I only saw one black person there. And the fact is, who were the people who became a rising portion of the labor force? Well, they were blacks moving up from the South to Detroit, to the North, to work in factories. White people don't want to work in factories. So, and it's not only that Americans don't want to work in it, white people don't. And I didn't see any immigrants there. Immigrants come in. Who's going to work at a factory job paying so little? Well, that's immigrants did this for 100 years. That's all cut back now. So if you stop the flow of raw construction labor and agricultural labor and servants and all sorts of industrial jobs, you're going to have an empty industrial economy.
No, and as I said, these are created by AI.
I know.
And they are not, they are essentially trying to say, they're essentially addressing the predominantly white working class that has voted for Trump, or those sections of the predominantly white working class that voted for Trump. Not all of them did, but a lot of them did, enough to get him into the White House. That's so essentially it's a certain ideological message they're sending, and they're trying to reinforce this idea that Americans in general, but they mean white Americans, don't want these jobs. Of course, what this completely forgets is two things. Number one, even with offshoring, which has happened a lot, which is certainly part of the reason for the deindustrialization of the United States, not all of it, but certainly a part of it. What has also happened is that industry, like jobs in the United States, like even within the United States, there are enough jobs that are involved drudgery, that and in order to get people to do those jobs, what the other side of what they've done is they have essentially brought in immigrants who are supposed to. The whole idea of bringing them is that they're supposed to work in bad working conditions, with bad, with low tech employment, on bad working conditions, bad wages, etc., etc. So. And this is supposed to be something we ought to accept. And of course, the real answer to this is that part of the, while offshoring is one part of the reason, another part of the reason for deindustrialization is very simply, American corporations have preferred to invest in finance rather than productively. They have preferred to invest in finance rather than upgrade and have high-tech manufacturing of the sort that you can have in the United States. So even to the extent that we have manufacturing in the United States, the jobs remain relatively low tech. And so there's no way. And the other part of it, of course, is that there is no way that you can reindustrialize the United States. And this is something that people have to point out, without investing in education, without investing in creating a highly skilled workforce, because factories don't look like what we saw in those images anymore. Factories, if there's going to be reindustrialization in the United States, they will have to be very high tech. In order for them to be very high tech, you need to have a highly skilled labor force.
Well, you mentioned high tech, and Trump's policy is aimed to prevent high-tech employment specifically. He's imposed tariffs, most of all in his first term and against now, on raw materials, on steel and aluminum. He's singled them out. Raw materials. Well, the whole strategy of protective tariffs is that of England in the 19th century and America. You want to import low-priced raw materials and make your profits in working them up into finished manufactures, which is where the value added is supposed to be. Well, if you impose tariffs on steel and aluminum, and Trump trotted out some labor union members from the steel industry, then any manufacturer who makes anything with steel or aluminum in it has the prices going up. And other countries, no other country would think of taxing the raw material instead of the high value added. So already this has put any potential American industrialist behind the eight ball, because their cost of raw materials is higher than those in any other country.
No, and you're so right, Michael. I mean, historically, the capitalist system has always also been imperialist. And people forget this element because, capitalism necessarily requires a kind of an imperialist cushion within which to survive and thrive. Because what is the function of this imperialist cushion? It's not just to be a market for their excess commodities and be an outlet for their excess capital. It is also it is also for so that this cocoon can supply the capitalist economies with cheap inputs and cheap labor.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, from its very beginnings, I mean, just think about it. We are always told the beginnings of capitalism occurs with the Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom. The darn Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom took place on the basis of an input, namely cotton. The supply of this was organized on the basis that American planters in the southern United States, using slave labor, would supply the factories of Manchester and elsewhere in the north of England with this critical raw material. So just think about it. From the beginning, capitalism has relied on cheap inputs, cheap labor, etc., to make profits.
Well, there's one thing you need besides labor and raw materials, and that's machinery. And machinery is vital to the supply chain. What enabled England to undersell India in the textile trade was steam-powered looms, powered mechanized production. Now, the United States isn't able to produce the range of machinery that you need to work up these materials and employ labor, because machinery is made of a lot of different parts. And many of these parts are now made in foreign countries, just like auto parts are made in Canada and Mexico. And you can't make a whole automobile if you don't have a particular carburetor screw or whatever goes into it. You've cut off the parts that America is dependent on other countries. And in addition, for instance, magnets and particular raw materials like rare earths, which are needed for their heavy magnetic characteristics, and they're needed for information technology, for all of the computers, for the military technology. And what industry there is in America is very largely military, to make, I would say they're to making arms, but the arms really aren't to fight in a war, because they don't work very well. They're really just to sort of employ labor. But you don't have either the machinery or the raw materials or the labor. So now we have three things that we don't need for industrialization, that Trump is Trump's policy and those of the Democrats are designed to choke off.
And also I'd add that, of course, you talk about machinery and, of course, the supply chains and all that. These are, of course, important things. But there's another element, which is that today it is not the United States that is in the forefront of the best technologies and so on. It is China. And that's also very interesting, because we're always told that capitalism is best at innovation. It's best at, increasing productivity and blah, blah, and so on. In reality, it is socialist China that is leaping forward, leaps and bounds